3 weeks passed after the human delegation walked out of the council chamber. In that time, not a single message came from Earth. No requests for new meetings. No desperate pleas to return to the table. Nothing but silence. At first, the council treated this as expected behavior. Young species often needed time to accept reality. The humans were probably arguing among themselves, their leaders struggling to explain why they had failed to secure an agreement. Soon enough, they would come crawling back, ready to accept whatever terms were offered. But the silence continued. Counselor Trixala was the first to notice something strange. She had received reports from her trade officials about unusual movements in human space. They have recalled all their diplomatic staff from Council Worlds, she announced at a closed session. Every ambassador, every trade representative, every cultural attaché, all of them have returned to human territory. Vetheron waved his hand dismissively. They are sulking. It is what children do when they do not get what they want. They will realize soon enough that isolation serves no one. There is more, Trixala continued. Human merchant ships are no longer using standard trade routes. They are rerouting all their cargo through their own transit corridors. Traffic through our shipping lanes has dropped by 40%. This got the Council's attention. The galaxy was connected by a vast network of faster-than-light transit lanes, and some of the most important routes passed directly through human space. The humans had always allowed free passage, collecting only small fees for maintenance. It was one of the things that made them valuable, even if the Council would never admit it. Let them play their games, Vetheron said, though his voice carried less confidence than before. They cannot maintain this forever. Their economy is too small to survive without galactic trade. Sindari Prime's form flickered with what might have been concern. Our financial analysts have run projections. If the humans continue their current course, it will cause significant disruption to shipping schedules. The effects will compound over time. Then we will wait, Vetheron declared. Time is on our side. It always has been. Far away in the Sol system, a very different conversation was taking place. Admiral Kevin Donnelly stood before the United Terran Defense Council in a secure chamber deep beneath the surface of Earth. The room was plain and functional, nothing like the grand halls of the Galactic Council. Humanity had never cared much for showing off. They cared about results. The Council believes we are bluffing, Kevin said, pointing to a holographic display that showed the current state of galactic affairs. They think we need them more than they need us. They are counting on economic pressure to break our resolve. Secretary of Defense Maria Vasquez studied the display carefully. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had spent her entire life preparing for challenges that others said were impossible. This was just one more. And what do our analysts say? She asked. They say the Council has made a critical error in judgment, Kevin replied. They have not paid attention to geography. He zoomed the display to show human territory, a modest section of space that sat between 3 major galactic powers. The Nexus Transit Corridor runs directly through our region. It connects the Kithrani core worlds to the Vrelix manufacturing centers to the Torvani agricultural colonies. Without that corridor, ships have to take the long way around, adding months to journey times. General Patricia Coleman, head of strategic operations, stepped forward. She was tall and built like a soldier, with a face that rarely showed emotion. The Council species have grown comfortable, she said. They have not fought a real war in over 2,000 years. Their militaries are ceremonial forces, designed to look impressive in parades. They have forgotten what it means to face an enemy that does not quit. Maria nodded slowly. She understood what they were saying. The Council had mistaken human patience for weakness. They had assumed that because humanity was young and small, it would behave like all the other young and small species that had come before. They had not considered the possibility that humans were different. What do you recommend? Maria asked. We wait, Kevin said. We close our borders to non-essential traffic. We redirect all our trade to neutral species who are not council members, and we prepare. Prepare for what? Patricia stepped closer to the display. The council will not accept this quietly. Eventually, they will try to pressure us more directly. When that happens, we need to be ready. Maria looked around the room at the faces of her military and civilian advisors. These were people who had dedicated their lives to protecting humanity. They were not afraid. They were determined. Do it, she said. Close the borders, redirect the trade, and get our shipyards running at full capacity. If the council wants to test our resolve, we will show them what human resolve looks like. In the weeks that followed, something remarkable happened across human space. Shipyards that had been dormant for years roared back to life. Factories that had been producing consumer goods switched to military production. Research facilities that had been studying alien technology began working around the clock to develop new systems based on everything humanity had learned. And for the first time in its brief galactic history, humanity began to truly unite. Old divisions between nations and colonies faded as everyone recognized the common threat. Differences that had seemed important before now seemed trivial. There was only one thing that mattered: survival. Ambassador Daniel Mercer watched these changes from his office on Earth. He had been preparing reports on the Council's likely next moves, but he found himself increasingly distracted by what he saw happening around him. Samantha Price entered his office with a datapad. The latest numbers, sir. Military recruitment is up 300%. Industrial production is at levels we have not seen since the last World War. And civilian morale is the highest it has been in decades. They wanted to break us. Instead, they united us. Should we send a message to the Council? Let them know we are willing to talk if they change their terms. No. Daniel looked out the window at the busy streets below, filled with people going about their work with new purpose. They made their position clear. Now we make ours. They can watch and wonder what we are doing. The silence will speak louder than any message we could send. Samantha nodded and turned to leave. At the door, she paused. Do you think they understand yet? Do you think they realize what they started? Daniel considered the question. Somewhere out in the galaxy, the Council was probably still telling itself that everything was under control. They were probably still confident that their ancient strategies would work. They had thousands of years of history on their side. But history had a way of changing. Not yet, Daniel said quietly. But they will. The silence continued. And in that silence, humanity prepared for whatever was coming. They did not know exactly what form the next challenge would take. They only knew that when it came, they would face it together. They would face it as humans always had, with courage, with determination, and with an absolute refusal to kneel. 2 months after the humans walked out of negotiations, the Galactic Council found itself facing problems it had not anticipated. What had started as a minor diplomatic dispute was growing into something much larger, and the cracks were beginning to show. The first signs of trouble came from the Torvani homeworld. Councillor Morath received urgent reports from his agricultural ministers about food shortages in several major cities. The situation made no sense at first. The Torvani had vast farms across dozens of planets. They produced more food than any other species in the galaxy. How could they possibly be running short? The answer was simple: transportation. Most Torvani food production happened in outer colonies far from the homeworld. The harvest had to be shipped across vast distances to reach population centers. For thousands of years, this had been easy because the fastest routes passed through human space. Ships loaded with grain and vegetables and protein supplements would travel through the Nexus Transit Corridor and arrive at their destinations within weeks. Now, with human borders closed, those ships had to take the long way around. Journeys that once took 3 weeks now took 3 months. Fresh produce spoiled in cargo holds. Meat rotted before it could reach processors. Supply chains that had worked perfectly for generations suddenly collapsed. Riots broke out in 3 major Torvani cities. Citizens who had never experienced hunger in their lives found themselves standing in lines for basic rations. They demanded answers from their leaders, and their leaders had none to give. The Sindari faced different problems, but equally severe ones. Their economy depended on rare minerals from the Kelvin sector, elements that could only be found in a handful of star systems. These minerals powered everything from communication devices to faster-than-light engines. Without them, the Sindari banking systems and technology networks would slowly grind to a halt. The mineral shipments had always passed through human space without issue. Now, human customs officials had been stationed at every transit point, and they were following every rule in the book with careful precision. Every cargo container was inspected. Every document was verified. Every tiny irregularity resulted in delays while paperwork was completed. Processing times that once took hours now took weeks. The Sindari warehouses sat empty while their ships waited in endless queues at human checkpoints. "This is economic warfare," Ambassador Sindari Prime declared at an emergency council session. "The humans are strangling us without firing a single shot. They are using our own dependence against us." Vethoron listened to these reports with growing frustration. How had things gone so wrong so quickly? They were supposed to need the Council's approval to survive. Instead, they were proving that the Council needed human cooperation more than anyone had realized. "We must respond with strength," Vethoron announced. "Send the Third Fleet to the border of human space. Let them see that the Council's patience has limits. They will understand that their little games have consequences." Counselor Marath looked uncomfortable. "Is that wise? We do not know what the humans have been doing during these past months. Military action seems premature." The humans had a handful of patrol ships and some cargo freighters converted into warships, Trixalis said dismissively. "They cannot possibly stand against a full Council fleet. One show of force, and they will remember their place." The Kethrani Third Fleet assembled within a week. 200 warships of various sizes gathered at the staging point, their hulls gleaming with the colors of the hegemony. It was the largest military force the Council had deployed in centuries. The very sight of it was supposed to make enemies surrender before a single weapon was fired. Fleet Commander Zothrel stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the stars stretch into lines as his ships entered faster-than-light travel. He had never actually fought in a real battle. None of his officers had. But he was confident that would not matter. The humans would see his fleet and immediately begin begging for mercy. The Third Fleet arrived at the edge of human space exactly on schedule. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel and activated their sensors, expecting to find a token defense force waiting for them. What they found made Zothrel's blood run cold. The entire Terran First Armada was waiting for them. Human ships stretched across the void, in a formation that spoke of careful planning and discipline. Carriers, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and dozens of smaller vessels that Zothrel did not even recognize. They were not hiding. They were not running. They were simply there, holding their position, waiting to see what the Council would do. Commander Nathan Brooks stood on the bridge of the carrier Relentless, watching the Kethrani fleet on his tactical display. He had been preparing for this moment for weeks. Every possible scenario had been analyzed. Every contingency had been planned. The human fleet was ready for whatever came next. "Sir, the Kethrani have stopped," his sensor officer reported. "They are not advancing." Nathan nodded. He had expected this. The Kethrani had come looking for an easy victory. They had expected to intimidate a weaker opponent into submission. Instead, they found themselves facing a force that matched them ship for ship, with crews who showed no sign of fear. "Standard frequencies," The communication officer complied, and Nathan spoke clearly. "Attention Kethrani Fleet. This is Commander Nathan Brooks of the Terran First Armada. You have entered restricted space. Turn back now, and there will be no conflict. Advance further, and we will consider it an act of war. The choice is yours." The standoff lasted 72 hours. For 3 days, the two fleets faced each other across the void. Neither side fired a shot. Neither side backed down. Zothrel sent message after message back to the Council, demanding instructions. His supplies were running low. His crews were nervous. The humans showed no sign of weakening. If anything, their formation seemed to grow stronger as additional ships arrived to reinforce their position. Finally, the order came from High Counselor Vetheron himself: withdraw. The Third Fleet turned and left human space without achieving a single one of its objectives. They returned home in silence, the taste of failure bitter in every officer's mouth. News of the withdrawal spread across the galaxy within days. For the first time in recorded history, the Council had sent a military force to intimidate a younger species, and that species had refused to be intimidated. The great and powerful Kethrani hegemony had blinked. On Earth, crowds gathered in the streets to celebrate. They did not celebrate violence or conquest. They celebrated the simple fact that humanity had stood its ground and refused to be bullied. Admiral Kevin Donnelly received Commander Brooks via secure communication. "Well done, Nathan. You held the line." Brooks looked tired but satisfied. "They thought we were bluffing, Admiral. They thought we would scatter like frightened animals when we saw their ships. They were wrong. They were wrong about a lot of things," Kevin agreed. "And I suspect they are only beginning to realize it." Back on the Council station, the mood was dark. The failure of the Third Fleet had shattered the illusion of Council invincibility. For the first time, other species began to whisper among themselves. If the humans can stand up to the Council, perhaps others could too. The cracks were spreading, and no one knew how to stop them. The withdrawal of the Third Fleet sent shockwaves through the entire galaxy. For 10,000 years, the Galactic Council had maintained order through a simple formula: economic pressure combined with overwhelming military superiority. No young species had ever challenged this system successfully. The message was always clear: submit or be destroyed. Now, humanity had proven that message to be hollow. In the great chamber of the Council station, the atmosphere had changed. Where once there had been calm confidence, now there was tension and barely concealed anger. The four ruling species were no longer united in their purpose. They were looking for someone to blame. Counselor Trixala's mandibles clicked in agitation as she addressed the chamber. "This disaster is entirely your fault, Vetheron. You assured us the humans were primitive and weak. You said they would collapse within days of our pressure. You said sending the fleet would end this matter quickly." Vetheron's 4 eyes narrowed dangerously. "I made decisions based on the information available. Our intelligence indicated that human military capacity was limited. No one could have predicted they would build up their forces so quickly." "Perhaps someone should have been watching more closely," Sindari Prime said, their form flickering with unusual intensity, "instead of simply assuming the humans would behave like every other species." Counselor Marath sat quietly, listening to his colleagues argue. He had warned them. In private meetings, he had suggested that the humans might be different, that their unusual history might make them harder to break. No one had listened. Now they were all paying the price for that arrogance. "What concerns me most is not what has already happened," Marath finally said, his deep voice cutting through the argument. "What concerns me is what is happening right now." He activated a holographic display showing intelligence reports from human space. The images showed construction yards building new ships at an incredible pace, research facilities working day and night. Industrial centers, producing materials and equipment faster than any species in galactic history. Our scientists have analyzed these reports, Morath continued. In the past 3 months, the humans have made technological advances that took us centuries to achieve. They are reverse engineering our own technology and improving upon it. They are developing new weapons, new shields, new propulsion systems, and they are doing it at a rate we have never encountered in any species before. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans were not just surviving. They were growing stronger. Every day that passed without resolution meant facing an increasingly capable opponent. How is this possible? Trixala demanded. They have been a spacefaring species for barely 200 years. We have been among the stars for millennia. Morath pulled up another display showing historical records. I have been researching human history, trying to understand them better. What I found was disturbing. These beings evolved on a harsh world with limited resources. They faced constant competition, constant danger. They learned to adapt quickly because those who did not adapt died. He cycled through images of human history, ancient wars, technological revolutions, disasters overcome, challenges met. In just a few thousand years, they went from primitive tools to splitting atoms. They went from simple boats to landing on their moon. Every time they faced an obstacle, they found a way to overcome it. In years, sometimes months, Sindari Prime's form dimmed slightly as they processed this information. You are saying that pressure does not break them. It makes them stronger. I am saying that we have made a terrible miscalculation, Morath replied. We treated them as children to be disciplined. We should have been trying to make them our allies. Vethoron slammed his fist against the table. Enough of this weakness. They are still a single species with limited territory. We have 4 species with thousands of worlds. If we combine our fleets, we can crush them through sheer numbers. At what cost? Morath asked quietly. Even if we win a war against the humans, how many ships will we lose? How many soldiers? How many resources? And while we are fighting them, what happens to our other borders? What happens to the other young species who are watching this situation very carefully? That question hung in the air like poison. The Council had maintained power, not through constant war, but through the threat of war. If that threat was shown to be empty, if other species saw that resistance was possible, the entire galactic order could collapse. Trixella made a sound that might have been a sigh. What do you suggest, Morath? That we surrender to the humans? Give them whatever they want? I suggest we do something the Council has not done in 10,000 years, Morath replied. I suggest we admit we were wrong. I suggest we apologize. The words seemed to shock the other counselors. Apologize? The Galactic Council did not apologize. It dictated terms. It punished those who disobeyed. It certainly did not admit mistakes, but times had changed, whether they wanted to accept it or not. After hours of heated debate, the Council reached a decision. They would send a message to Earth, requesting new negotiations. They would not apologize directly, but they would express willingness to reconsider their previous position. It was not much, but it was more than the Council had ever offered to any younger species. On Earth, Secretary of Defense Maria Vasquez received the message in her office. She read it twice, then called for an emergency meeting of the Defense Council. They want to talk again, she announced to the assembled leaders. They say they are willing to reconsider their demands. Admiral Kevin Donnelly studied the message with a skeptical expression. They do not admit any wrongdoing. They do not offer any concrete changes. This could be another attempt to buy time. General Patricia Coleman agreed. We should be careful. The Council has thousands of years of experience in manipulation. They may be trying to divide us, or find our weaknesses. Ambassador Daniel Mercer, who had been invited to the meeting for his expertise on Council politics, offered a different perspective. The fact that they reached out at all is significant. The Council never initiates contact after a failure. They wait for the other side to come to them. That they are asking for talks means they are genuinely worried. Maria considered all of their input carefully. This was perhaps the most important decision humanity had made since first contact with alien life. The wrong choice could lead to war. The right choice could secure humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. "We will agree to meet," she finally said, "but not on the Council station, not under their terms. If they want to talk, they come to us, they come to Earth." The response was sent, and the Council had no choice but to accept. For the first time in galactic history, representatives of the ruling species would travel to a younger world to negotiate. The symbolism was not lost on anyone. As preparations began on both sides, Counselor Morath stood alone in his quarters, looking out at the stars. He thought about the humans, about their strange combination of aggression and creativity, violence and compassion. They were unlike any species the galaxy had ever seen. For 10,000 years, the Council had believed it understood how civilizations worked. They believed that power was everything, that might made right, that younger species existed to serve older ones. The humans were proving all of those beliefs wrong. The galaxy was changing. Morath could feel it in his bones. The old ways were dying, and something new was being born. He only hoped that the Council could adapt quickly enough to survive the transformation. If they could not, then the reckoning was only beginning. The diplomatic vessel Horizon hung in orbit above Earth, its sleek hull catching the light of the sun. It was not the largest ship in the Terran fleet, and it was certainly not the most powerful. But today, it would host the most important meeting in galactic history. Ambassador Daniel Mercer stood in the main conference room, making final preparations. The room had been designed to send a message. There were no towering pillars meant to intimidate visitors, no ancient symbols carved into the walls to remind others of past glory. Instead, the room featured large windows that looked down at Earth, showing the blue oceans and green continents of humanity's home. "This is where we came from," the room seemed to say. "This is what we are protecting." Lieutenant Commander Samantha Price entered and nodded to Daniel. "The Council shuttles have docked. They are being escorted to the conference room now." 6 months ago, he had walked out of negotiations feeling defeated and angry. Now the Council was coming to him. The situation had changed completely, and he intended to make sure it stayed changed. The doors opened, and the 4 representatives of the Galactic Council entered. They looked different than Daniel remembered. High Counselor Vetheron's confident posture was gone, replaced by something that might have been exhaustion. Counselor Trixala's mandibles were still, none of the dismissive clicking that had once irritated Daniel so much. Sindari Prime's form seemed dimmer, less imposing. Only Counselor Morath looked relatively unchanged, his bulging eyes studying everything with careful attention. "Please, sit," Daniel said, gesturing to the chairs arranged around a simple rectangular table. No one sat at the head. No one was elevated above anyone else. Another subtle message. The council members took their seats. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable, and Daniel realized they were waiting for him to break it. They had come here expecting to follow, not lead. "Let me be clear about humanity's position," Daniel began. "We are not seeking revenge for how we were treated. We are not seeking to dominate the Council or take over galactic affairs. We are seeking exactly what we sought from the very beginning: genuine partnership, mutual respect, and fair treatment." Vetheron shifted in his seat. His pride was clearly wounded, but he managed to keep his voice level. "The Council acknowledges that our previous demands were unreasonable. We are prepared to offer full membership in the Council, with equal voting rights. Your species would have the same voice as any other member. Additionally, The Council will issue a formal statement recognizing humanity's contributions to galactic peace and prosperity. It was more than the Council had ever offered any younger species in 10,000 years. 6 months ago, Daniel would have celebrated this moment as an incredible victory. Now, he simply nodded. "We do not need your apology," he said. "What we need is your understanding." Counselor Morath leaned forward, his expression curious. "What do you mean, Ambassador?" Daniel stood and walked to the window, looking down at the planet below. Humanity did not come to the stars looking for masters to serve. We did not spend thousands of years fighting and struggling and dreaming just to become servants in someone else's empire. We came to explore, to learn, to grow, to contribute. We came as equals, and we will accept nothing less. He turned back to face the Council. "Your offer of membership and voting rights is acceptable, but I want to be very clear about what will happen if we are ever again threatened or dismissed as lesser beings. Humanity does not forget, and humanity does not forgive easily. If the Council can truly accept us as partners, as equals, then we can become the greatest allies you have ever known. Our creativity, our adaptability, our determination can work for the betterment of all species. But if this is just another game, if you are simply waiting for an opportunity to put us back in what you consider our place, then you should know that we will resist. We will always resist, and we will win." The Council members exchanged glances. None of them seemed to know quite how to respond to such directness. They were used to elaborate diplomatic protocols, carefully worded statements that said everything and nothing. Daniel was speaking to them like a soldier speaks to other soldiers, plainly and without decoration. Sindari Prime spoke first. "Ambassador, I must ask a question that has been troubling me. When we first pressured your species, when we threatened you with economic isolation and military force, you could have given in. It would have been easier. You would have avoided months of hardship and risk. Why did you choose to resist?" Daniel considered the question carefully. It deserved an honest answer. Because surrender was never really an option. You see, Counselor, humanity has spent its entire existence fighting against impossible odds. We survived ice ages that killed countless other species. We survived plagues that should have wiped us out. We survived world wars where we nearly destroyed ourselves. We clawed our way out of the mud, built civilizations, and reached for the stars. We did not do all of that, overcome all of those obstacles, just to kneel before the first bully we encountered out here. He walked back to the table and extended his hand in the human gesture of peace. "So here is our offer. True partnership. No conditions, no threats, no games. A real alliance between equals, working together for the benefit of all our peoples. Take it or leave it." For a moment, no one moved. Then Counselor Morath stood and reached across the table, grasping Daniel's hand in the unfamiliar human custom. "I accept on behalf of the Torvani Federation," he said, "and I hope this is the beginning of a new era for all of us." One by one, the other council members rose. Sindari Prime's form brightened as they extended an appendage of light to touch Daniel's other hand. Trixala's mandibles clicked once, but this time it seemed almost friendly, and she made a gesture of agreement according to Vrelic's custom. Even Vetheron, his pride still wounded, but his practical mind recognizing reality, gave a formal bow of acceptance. The Treaty of Earth, as it would come to be called, was signed later that day. Its terms were simple, but revolutionary. Humanity would become a full member of the Galactic Council with equal voting rights. Trade routes through human space would be reopened under fair terms. Technology sharing would be mutual, not one-sided. And most importantly, the Council officially recognized that all spacefaring species, regardless of how long they had been among the stars, had equal dignity and worth. As the delegations prepared to depart, Samantha fell into step beside Daniel as he walked through the corridors of the horizon. "Do you think this will last?" she asked quietly. "The Council has been doing things their way for 10,000 years. Can they really change?" Daniel thought about the question as he watched the alien diplomats boarding their shuttles. Former enemies were now, at least officially, allies. The future was uncertain, as it always was. But something had fundamentally shifted in the galaxy's power structure, and there was no going back. "I think they finally understand something important," he said. "What is that?" Daniel smiled slightly. "That humanity does not play to survive. We play to win." In the years that followed, the Terran Council Alliance would become the most powerful force in galactic history. Human innovation, combined with alien knowledge, produced wonders that neither could have achieved alone. Diseases that had plagued species for millennia were cured. New energy sources were developed that made old conflicts over resources meaningless. Exploration vessels went further than any had gone before, discovering new worlds and new possibilities. Threats that once seemed impossible to overcome were met and defeated. When a hostile force from beyond the galaxy's edge appeared, it was human tactics, combined with Council resources, that drove them back. When ancient machines from a long-dead civilization awakened and threatened populated worlds, it was human creativity that found a way to communicate with them and prevent catastrophe. And throughout the galaxy, a saying emerged among the younger species, whispered with a mixture of admiration and healthy caution. It was passed down from generation to generation, a piece of wisdom that had been earned through blood and sacrifice and determination. "Never corner a human," they would say. "They do not know how to surrender. They only know how to rise." It was a warning, but it was also a tribute, because in the end, the galaxy had learned something that humanity had always known: that the measure of a species is not how easily it submits to power, but how fiercely it fights for what it believes in. And humans believed in themselves. They always had. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council Station was built to make visitors feel small. Giant pillars rose toward a ceiling that seemed to touch the stars themselves. The floor was made of polished black stone that reflected the cold blue lights above. Everything about this place was designed to remind younger species of their place in the universe. Ambassador Daniel Mercer had walked these halls many times over the past 6 months. He knew every corner, every shadow, every carved symbol on the ancient walls. He also knew that none of it impressed him anymore. The beauty of this place had faded the moment he understood what the Council truly wanted from humanity. He adjusted his formal suit and stepped through the massive doors into the negotiation chamber. His aide, Lieutenant Commander Samantha Price, walked 2 steps behind him. Her face showed nothing, but Daniel knew she was just as tired of this game as he was. The circular table at the center of the room was surrounded by representatives from the 4 ruling species of the Galactic Council. High Counselor Vitheron of the Kethrani hegemony sat directly across from the human seats. He was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 eyes that never seemed to blink. His species had ruled this part of the galaxy for over 10,000 years, and they never let anyone forget it. To his left sat Counselor Trixala of the Vrilix Consortium. She was insectoid, with a hard shell covering her body and mandibles that clicked when she spoke. Her people controlled most of the galaxy's manufacturing and trade. On the right was Counselor Morath of the Torvani Federation. He looked almost like a large frog, with smooth, wet skin and bulging eyes. The Torvani were known as the farmers and scientists of the galaxy. Finally, there was Sindari Prime, the representative of the Sindari Collective. The Sindari were strange beings made of shifting light and energy. No one quite understood what they were, but everyone respected their ancient wisdom and their control over the galaxy's banking systems. Daniel took his seat and placed his documents on the table. He had prepared a new proposal, one that offered even more concessions than the last. He hated it, but Earth's government had insisted on trying one more time. "Ambassador Mercer," Vetheron said, his voice deep and slow, "we have reviewed your latest offer. It is inadequate." Daniel felt his stomach tighten. "With respect, High Counselor, we have already agreed to reduced patrol zones, shared technology databases, and preferential trade agreements. What more could you possibly want?" Vetheron leaned back in his chair. The other counselors watched with expressions that Daniel could only describe as amusement. They were enjoying this. "The terms are simple," Vetheron said. "Humanity will dismantle 60% of its naval fleet. You will give up mining rights to all your Orion Belt colonies, and you will accept permanent observer status on the Council. You may watch our proceedings, but you will have no vote." The words hit Daniel like a punch to the chest. 6 months of negotiations, 6 months of good faith efforts, and this was their answer. They did not want partners. They wanted servants. "You cannot be serious," Samantha whispered beside him. But Daniel could see that Vetheron was completely serious. All of them were. They had never intended to treat humanity as equals. This entire negotiation had been a performance, a way to slowly break down human resistance until they accepted whatever scraps the Council offered. "High Counselor," Daniel said, keeping his voice steady, "these terms would leave humanity defenseless. Our colonies would be stripped of resources. We would have no voice in decisions that affect our own future. This is not a partnership. This is surrender." "You are a young species," Vetheron replied. His tone was the same one an adult might use when explaining something to a foolish child. "You do not understand how the galaxy works. Every species that came before you accepted their place in the natural order. In time, if you prove yourselves worthy, perhaps your status will improve. But for now, you must learn humility." Trixala's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. The humans thought they could walk among giants as equals. How charming. Daniel looked around the table. He saw no sympathy in any of their faces. Even Morath, who had sometimes seemed reasonable in private conversations, showed no sign of objection. They had all agreed to this. They all believed humanity would eventually give in. And why would they not believe it? Every other young species had done exactly that. The Council had been playing this game for thousands of years. They knew that isolation and economic pressure would eventually break any resistance. They knew that small species could not survive without access to galactic trade routes and technology. They knew that in the end, everyone kneeled, but they did not know humanity. Daniel stood up slowly. He gathered his documents and placed them in his case. Samantha rose beside him, her eyes asking a silent question. He gave her a small nod. "High Counselor Vetheron," Daniel said, "humanity came to these negotiations seeking friendship. We offered to share our knowledge, our resources, and our protection. We asked only to be treated with basic respect and fairness." He closed his case with a sharp click that echoed through the silent chamber. "You have responded with insults, threats, and demands that no free people could ever accept. You have made it clear that you see us as nothing more than a problem to be managed, a species to be controlled." Vetheron's 4 eyes narrowed. "Choose your next words carefully, Ambassador." "I have chosen them," Daniel replied. "And here they are. Humanity declines your offer. All of it. We will not dismantle our fleet. We will not surrender our colonies. We will not sit silently while others decide our fate." He turned and walked toward the door. Samantha followed without hesitation. "You are making a terrible mistake," Vetheron called after him. "Where will you go? Who will trade with you? How long do you think you can survive alone in this galaxy?" Daniel stopped at the door and looked back over his shoulder. I suppose we will find out. But I want you to remember this moment, High Counselor. Remember it well, because one day you will understand that the mistake was not ours. The doors closed behind the human delegation with a sound like thunder. In the chamber, the council members exchanged glances. Trixala made a dismissive gesture with her upper limbs. They will be back within a week. They always come back. Vethorin nodded slowly. Let them have their pride for a few more days. Reality will teach them what we could not. Morath said nothing. He simply stared at the closed doors, with an expression that, if anyone had been paying attention, might have looked like the first seeds of doubt. But no one was paying attention. The council had already moved on to other business. The humans were a minor annoyance, nothing more. They had no idea what they had just started.